Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go over all the characters in Deadlock and give you my opinion on where they stand in a tier list. Balance changes will be coming soon, so make sure you subscribe and be ready for more videos just like this. Alright, let's get right into it. So first up, we have Abrams. Abrams is a really strong tank, known for his incredible survivability, his mobility, and his damage output. He's a versatile hero who can excel in both the frontline tanking and in damage dealing roles. His playstyle often revolves around initiating fights, disrupting enemies, and soaking up damage for his team. His high mobility allows him to engage and disengage quickly, making him a difficult target to pin down. So I'm going to be putting Abrams in tier A, because overall he's just a very strong pick. He's not by any means the best pick in the game, but he definitely can hold his ground since he excels in many different categories. Next up is Bebop. Bebop is a high damage dealing bruiser. His kit revolves around dealing burst damage. His ult, that massive beam, can deal insane amounts of damage, and he has his detonator and explosive charge abilities that can crowd control enemies and set up some kills. I'm going to be putting Bebop down in tier B, just because even though he has insane amounts of damage, he requires a bit more synergy with his teammates to get more value out of his kit. Also, he can be a bit more vulnerable to ranged attacks, so he definitely benefits from a team helping him out. So now we're getting to Dynamo. Dynamo is a support hero known for his ability to control the battlefield with his electric abilities. He can both buff his allies and debuff his enemies. Dynamo's full playstyle focuses on support and control. But not only disrupting enemies and protecting allies, he can also set up some really good kills. I'm going to be putting Dynamo down in tier B, just because he requires a bit more skill and coordination to be effective. So next up is Greytalon. Greytalon's a high mobility assassin known for his ability to sneak behind the enemy lines and eliminate high priority targets. His kit revolves around stealth, mobility, and burst damage. He's a high risk and high reward hero who can turn the tide of a fight with a well-timed assassination. I'm going to be putting Greytalon in B tier just because he's a really strong pick in the right hands, but he does require a bit more coordination to become more effective. Now we're moving on to Haze. Haze is a very strong hero who excels at controlling the battlefield with her mist-based abilities. She can damage her enemies, debuff them with things like sleep. Through her ability Fixation, Haze gains a stack every time she deals damage to an enemy, and she gains 2 stacks when she hits a headshot, and these stacks pretty much make you deal more damage to that target. So she can deal a ton of damage. And she has a lot of utility with her unique kit with things like stealth. Her Mist Shroud ability is really great for escaping danger. So I'm going to be putting Haze in the S tier, and hear me out. She's very versatile. There's many different synergies and compositions that can work with her. She has easy escapes, can deal insane amounts of damage at late game, and has enough debuffs to keep the enemies on their toes. So now we're moving on to Infernus. He's a damage dealer known for his ability to deal sustained damage over time. His whole kit revolves around fire-based abilities that burn his enemies over time and deal heavy damage, and having really quick mobility. He's definitely a strong pick for any team that needs a reliable damage dealer. I know he's a fan favorite, so some people might not like this, but I'm going to be putting him in the B tier. He's a strong sustained damage dealer, but he can be pretty vulnerable to burst damage. So next up is Ivy. Ivy is probably the most versatile hero in this game. You can play them as a damage dealer, you can play them as a support, or even as a tank. All of Ivy's abilities are gargoyle-esque, where she can turn herself to stone and stun her enemies. She can attach herself to another ally, and both you and your ally get a really nice fire rate buff. So Ivy's playstyle can fully change based on what kind of role you're filling. She can deal insane amounts of burst damage with her ult, mixed with the stone stun. I'm going to be putting Ivy in B tier, just because even though they can be a really strong pick, they definitely require coordination with your team in order to get the most out of Ivy. Alright, so let's move on to Kelvin. Kelvin's a tank known for his ability to control the battlefield with his ice-based abilities. He can freeze the enemies, slow them down, and deal some great sustained damage to them. Even though Kelvin's more of a tank, he can even be played as a supportive hero, with his ultimate being that big shield dome healing allies inside of it. And I've ran some really fun support builds on Kelvin, where you just heal your allies, keep everyone up, while slowing your enemies and making sure they're having a bad time. He's really hard to kill with that escape ability he has, mixed with that ultimate, so he's a very valuable pick for any team. I'm going to be putting Kelvin in tier A, because he's a really strong tank, he can fill the support role, he has some great crowd control, and some really good damage. Lady Geist is next. She's essentially Deadlock's vampire or warlock character. She uses her own health to cast her abilities and drain the life of her opponents. Her signature soul exchange ultimate makes her a massive 1v1 threat as she swaps the health with her target, which just completely turns the tide in her favor. So Lady Geist is one of the best duelists in the game, making her a great split pusher, although she has a slow rate of fire on her primary weapon, so you need to make those shots count, and she can struggle a bit in big team fights as her ult is a bit easier to play around. I'm going to be putting Lady Geist in tier A because she's one of the best duelers in the game. She can turn tides of the fight completely in her favor, and you can definitely solo queue a bit easier on her. So next up we have Lash. Lash is a high action per minute hero who thrives on getting close and personal with his enemies and using his combos to completely obliterate them. He's definitely not easy to be effective with, but very satisfying to master the art of swinging to the opponents and wrestling slam the entire team. He has some of the best gap closing in the game, very strong CCs. Although he is a very mechanically demanding hero, you have to make sure you're facing the right way with your jumps and everything like that, and he can be easily poked by champions with good range or spacing. This one was really close, but I'm gonna have to put Lash in B tier just because of the amount of skill requires to get him set up properly. It doesn't mean you can't completely dominate games as him, it just most likely would be a bit more difficult. So now we're moving on to McGinnis. McGinnis is the engineer type archetype in this game. She creates turrets, has little canisters that people can heal at, can create a wall, and can unleash heavy barrage damage. Anyone can pick up McGinnis easily and be effective with her turrets, healing, and large magazine. Her wall usage can be really effective in team fights. She's an excellent hero if you want some versatility to the game. And with McGinnis's kit, she's a very powerful early and mid game hero. She has great sustain, keeping your allies alive, but she kind of lacks on the CC side of things other than the wall. And her damage can fall off late game compared to some of the other classes she relies on. She doesn't really have much mobility, so she can be pretty vulnerable to ganks or bad positioning. McGinnis remains to be a really strong pick going into A tier just because of the amount of supportive capability she has for her teammates and just the sheer usefulness you can easily get out of her kit. Now moving down to Mo and Krill. Mo and Krill are a super tank that can disrupt the battlefield with a combination of slows, disarms, and massive lockdown, all while recovering HP and being hard to get rid of. They're really great at disrupting their enemies, and they can be pretty impossible to kill in the right hands. Mo and Krill has really strong heals and tank buffs. They have that incredible burrow ability, allowing them to close any gap or escape any bad situation, and they have some of the best CC in the game with that ultimate, that I win button during ganks. There's some items that can counter Mo and Krill, so things like anti-healing can really disrupt this character. They can struggle in really wide open combat spaces as well in big team fights, and they're not really that good at long range. That being said, Mo and Krill is still one of the best characters in the game, so I'm going to be putting them in A tier. Moving on to Paradox. Paradox is probably one of the harder characters in Deadlock, although they have the opportunity to dominate the game with their playmaking abilities. Their kit revolves around bending space and time, and her ultimate's really great, where you pretty much swap positions with your enemy. She can make some massive plays with that swap, and she has a lot of room for creativity. However, she does lack mobility and escape tools, and she definitely is a bit more reliant on team coordination to get the most value from her ultimate and her abilities. I really like Paradox, but unfortunately, I'm going to be having to put them in C tier. Currently on third-party data analytics tools like MOBA Analytics, Paradox is sitting at 44% win rate, which is second worst in the game. Pocket is a really unique character. He's a mobile shotgun wielder with a ton of outplay potential packed into their kit. They excel in getting mid-range or up close, dealing massive damage, and being able to get out of that fight in a pinch. They're extremely slippery with that flying cloak and that enchanter's satchel. The high mobility makes them a really tough split pusher to deal with, and they're amongst one of the best in classes for AoE, with all four of their abilities having AoE capabilities. Pocket can get poked down from afar due to his shotgun to be close to mid-range, and there's a decent learning curve to Pocket with some of his core play patterns using cancels. Pocket's a really strong hero, and I'm going to be putting him in the B tier just because you have to get a lot of value out of that mobility, which definitely requires a bit more team coordination. So next up is Seven. Seven's a damage dealer that deals damage with lightning based attacks. Seven's an easy to use hero, has a ton of depth to him, and is probably considered one of the best in the game right now. He can output incredible damage and has some of the best aerial effect capabilities in this game. He has a really good stun for protection or ganks, and he's really good at farming. He doesn't have much mobility, so he is vulnerable to ganks or bad positioning. He's also vulnerable to CC, especially with his ultimate requiring channeling, and heroes that specialize in long range will be difficult for this hero to deal with. That being said, with Seven's incredible win rate of 58.6, I'm going to be putting him into the S tier. So next up is Shiv. Shiv is all about controlled aggression. His kit synergizes in a way that encourages you to set up favorable fights and quickly close in for the kill. Similar to Lash, he likes to get up and close to combo his enemies. If you're someone who likes to have options with things like combos or being able to spot weaknesses to capitalize on them quickly, then Shiv is definitely for you. He can deal overwhelming damage to single targets. He's great poking lanes, and he can easily win trades using that deferred damage passive he has. He has excellent mobility with dashes and his ultimate, and he can clear camps and farm really fast. He doesn't really have any CC outside of a slow. He's pretty squishy, to be honest, and he needs to get close range to win the fight. Just because of the amount of skill required with Shiv, I'm going to be putting him in the B tier. He's a really strong pick, but he requires somebody mechanically talented. Moving on to Vindicta. Vindicta is the classic sniper of Deadlock, but instead of a thing like a grapple hook, which most snipers have, she's able to take flight and levitate in the battlefield. If you like snowballing, she's a really great choice because she has this assassinate ability that grants you bonus souls for each successful killing blow, allowing her to pull ahead of the whole pack. She has really strong landing due to her reliable poke, her snares, and her vantage points with the flight. Also, she can impact nearby lanes from afar just to extend the lead to the rest of the team. She lacks horizontal mobility because her flight pretty much just goes up and stays there, and she only has one crowd control. So if she misses it, she can be very vulnerable, and she could feel a bit useless if she has a rough start in the game. Unfortunately, Vindicta's win rate is sitting at 43.9, which is the worst in the game right now. So hopefully we can see a buff for her soon, so we can see her up in the A tier or even the S tier. Viscous is up next. Viscous is probably the most mysterious character in the game. He's a green goo man that can be an absolute nuisance to his enemy team due to his wide range of disrupted crowd control effects. To top that all off, he's extremely mobile with his ultimate. That goo ball form lets him roll around like Wrecking Ball from Overwatch. Viscous is really good at putting constant pressure on the enemies. He's incredibly hard to kill due to his combinations of tankiness and mobility, and he adds an inherent safety net to his team with that cube ability. He's one of the more difficult characters to learn due to the high skill cap, and using his goo ball effectively definitely requires map awareness, and misplacing your puddle punches can easily put an ally in danger or save an enemy from death. I'm going to be putting Viscous in tier B. His kit definitely requires more coordination from his team, and you have a couple different opportunities to mess it up for your team. So next up we have Warden. Warden is a bruiser hero who's a potent duelist and can chase down enemies with blinding speed. He really knows how to hold down a front line and can make a big impact in teamfights by reducing the enemy stamina and by locking down key threats. He's a great tanky frontliner, especially in the spirit-based builds. He excels at chasing down fleeing enemies and clearing jungle camps while roaming, but he can get poked down from afar since he lacks the long-range abilities. He needs space to get that ultimate off since it has that wind-up, and snare isn't always the best engage as it's pretty easy to escape with stamina. I'm going to be putting Warden in the A tier. He's really close to being in the S tier, but it's really hard to put Warden in S tier without putting Mo and Krill or Abrams in there, just because those two are really strong tanks as well. Warden's a very strong hero and doesn't take much coordination to easily lock down the high priority targets on the enemy team. So for the second last character, we have Wraith. Wraith is one of Deadlock's best split pushers and duelists with a versatile kit. She uses a Tommy gun that shoots really fast and uses card tricks to deal devastating damage to your enemies. She can poke from afar and is tough to engage on due to her teleport, and if you leave her alone, she can absolutely shred waves and towers. She has an easy engage with a point and click CC. She has one of the best escapes and teleports in the game and can dominate sidelines with pressure. However, she doesn't really offer much utility if she falls behind, so she definitely needs to keep up with everybody else. She can be quite vulnerable to ganks if her teleport's down or she hasn't maxed it out. Wraith is a really strong pick for dealing damage, and she's going to be comfortably sitting in the B tier. You have reliable sustained damage, reliable mobility, and a reliable CC. Lastly, we have Yamato. Every time I see her, she reminds me of that scary painting in the movie It. And if you look at her background on the Deadlock game, none of it's in English. So she also is a mysterious character as well. Yamato is a samurai based class that can go absolutely god mode with her ultimate. It makes her go invincible, resets her ability cooldowns, and gives her infinite ammo. She can be pretty tricky to learn, but once you master her, she can really dominate the battlefield and outplay all our enemies. She has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game. There's a lot of different combos you can do on this character. She's a very strong duelist, skirmisher, and split pusher, and she's among the best in classes for chasing down enemies due to her high mobility. She can feel very fragile at the start, so she can have a little bit of a slower early game because she definitely needs the scale to get going fast. And engaging without her ultimate can put her in a really dangerous situation. Even though experts can absolutely master her and dominate her enemies, Yamato requires a bit more skill to easily coordinate with your allies, so I'm going to be putting her in the B tier. And there you go, this is my tier list for Deadlock's heroes. So if you're curious, I based all the tiers off this win rate section here. I did some of my own, like I put Haze in the S tier just because she can fulfill that role in my opinion. But yeah, for the most part, this is where I got all the stats. I'll put this link for all the stats and the characters in the description down below. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a like so YouTube knows it's a good video and it can share it to more people like yourself. And if you didn't, make sure you press the dislike button twice just so I know extra how much you didn't like it. And please subscribe to my channel to see more great Deadlock videos just like this. I'll be making more tier lists in the future as this game updates, and I'll be creating more builds and guides for the game as well. Alright, have a great day everyone. Cheers.